So, have you ever heard of this tiny little book, barely 100 pages, that just completely took over the world? Well, today we're going to dig into Who Moved My Cheese. It's this super simple story that people either see as this genius guide for dealing with change or as a pretty shady corporate trap. And when I say it took over the world, I mean it. The numbers are just wild. We're talking almost 30 million copies sold across the globe. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for nearly 5 years. Think about that. For a little story about a couple of mice and these two little people, that's just a crazy amount of influence.
So what's the big deal, right? What's the secret sauce? Well, the hook is actually really simple, but it's powerful. It basically asks, what if the secret to handling all the big scary changes in life? Losing a job, starting something new, even a big shift in your relationships. What if you could understand it all just by hearing a simple story about mice looking for cheese in a maze? Okay, so at its core, the book is what you'd call a parable. A simple story with a bigger meaning. It's all set inside a maze, and that maze is basically a stand-in for our world, right? It could be your job, your industry, your community. And inside this maze, you've got 4 characters, and they're all desperately searching for the one thing they really, really want.
And that one thing is cheese. But hold on, we're not talking about a slice of provolone here. In the story, cheese is this huge metaphor. It's whatever you want in life. Maybe it's that big promotion, a great relationship, having enough money to feel safe, or, just some peace and quiet. It's whatever goal you think is going to make you happy.
This is where it starts to get really interesting, because we get to meet the 4 characters. And they're not just random characters. They're designed to be stand-ins for the 4 basic ways all of us react when, our world gets completely flipped upside down.
Yeah, this is where the psychology of the whole thing kicks in. First, you've got the 2 mice. They're pretty straightforward. There's Sniff, who can basically smell change in the air long before it happens. And then there's Scurry, who, the second things shift, just bolts into action. No hesitation. Then you've got the more, complicated little people. There's Hem, who's super stubborn. He just denies anything is changing and resists it with everything he's got. And then there's Ha. He starts out a lot like him, but he's the one who slowly figures out that, hey, maybe adapting is the only way forward.
So take a second and think about that. When your world gets shaken up, which one are you? Really think about it. Are you a Sniff, a Scurry, a Hem, or a Haw? Come on, be honest with yourself. Most of us are probably a little bit of all of them, but we definitely have one that we lean into more often than not.
Okay, so the real hero of this story, the one we're supposed to follow, is Haw. See, after all their cheese just vanishes, he gets sick and tired of just sitting around complaining with him, so he makes this brave choice to go back out into the maze. And as he's exploring, he starts writing down what he's learning right there on the maze walls, kind of leaving this breadcrumb trail of simple but really powerful lessons about change.
And this is maybe the biggest takeaway from the whole book. The message is basically this. If you keep clinging to how things used to be, you're going to completely miss out on how awesome things could be. It's like the longer you sit around being sad about the old cheese, the longer you're just going to be hungry.
Now this next one, this is the question that changes everything for Haw. It's the key. He suddenly gets it. It's fear that has Ham totally paralyzed. And the book makes this great point that a lot of the time, our fear of what might happen is way worse than the thing that actually happens. We imagine these huge monsters lurking in the maze, but they're not even real.
And that brings us to this final kind of mind-bending lesson. Our instinct is to think that staying still is the safe move, right? Don't rock the boat. But the book just flips that idea completely on its head. It says that once the cheese is gone, doing nothing is actually the riskiest thing you can do. Yeah, the maze might seem scary, but sitting in an empty room, that's a guaranteed failure.
But here's the thing. This simple little story didn't just hang out on the self-help shelf. Oh no, it absolutely exploded in the business world. It became the handbook for managers, especially during those crazy times in the late 90s and early 2000s. When the dot-com bubble was bursting and companies were merging and downsizing like there was no tomorrow.
Seriously, companies started buying this book by the truckload. A big merger gets announced, layoffs are on the horizon, boom. You'd show up to your desk and there'd be a copy of Who Moved My Cheese waiting for you. It became this corporate code, a not-so-subtle way of saying, hey, things are changing around here. You better get with the program.
And it's wild, because you can actually see these characters playing out in the real world with huge companies. Take Netflix. They were total sniffs and scurries, right? They saw streaming coming and just went for it, while Blockbuster just sat there. IBM is a classic him-to-haw story. They did not want to let go of their hardware business, but they eventually and kind of painfully adapted to services. And then you've got a company like Amazon. They're just permanently in sniff mode, always scanning the horizon for what's next.
Okay, but this is where the story takes a really sharp turn. Because for every single person who read this book and felt empowered, there was someone else who saw it as, well, something much darker. The big question became, is this thing a helpful tool, or is it a manipulative trap?
And the debate really is split right down the middle. On one side, you have people saying, look, it's a simple, powerful metaphor about taking charge of your own life and not fighting the inevitable. But the other side, they're saying, no way, this is condescending corporate propaganda. It's designed to trick workers into accepting a raw deal, like getting laid off or taking a pay cut, and not even putting up a fight.
And let me tell you, the critics did not hold back. The writer Barbara Ehrenreich flat out called it the classic of downsizing propaganda. And their main point, their core argument, is that the book totally ignores the most important question of all. Who's the one moving the cheese in the first place? By making change seem like this natural force, like the weather, it totally lets the bosses off the hook for the choices they make that mess with everybody else's lives.
The backlash actually became its own little cultural moment. The book was so simple and so everywhere that it was just begging to be made fun of. And of course, the most famous parody was called, wait for it, Who Cut the Cheese? It just perfectly nailed that feeling of frustration from everyone who felt like the original book was talking down to them.
In this quote right here, it really gets to the absolute core of the criticism. The argument is that the book's real message, under the surface, is that employees should just shut up and accept whatever management throws at them. Forget about fairness, forget about being treated like a professional. From this point of view, you're not adapting to change, you're just giving in.
So that's really what it all boils down to. Is this book a genuinely helpful guide for being more resilient in life? Or is it a clever tool for corporate control? And, the answer probably comes down to one simple thing. Are you one of the little guys scrambling around in the maze, or are you one of the people moving the cheese?
Look, at the end of the day, whether you love this book or you hate it, you can't deny that it forces you to ask a really powerful question, a question that hits all of us, whether we're at work or not. The world is always going to change. The things you rely on, someday they might not be there. So when your cheese moves, what are you going to do? Are you going to sit there and wait, hoping it comes back? Or are you going to get back out there into the maze?